Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 28th of September 2022. These are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest updates as far as the flood situation in Pakistan is concerned and the relief and rehabilitation efforts. We'll also be talking about Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab, who has said that Pakistan does not want charity but economic justice, as it produces only 0.8% of carbon, but it is the most vulnerable country as far as the effects of climate change are concerned. And of course, as you can see, this is what is evident because of all the floods that have wreaked havoc across Pakistan. He was, of course, addressing a dialogue that was held in Wilson Center in Washington. He has also met with a lot of important leaders as far as Pakistan's situation is concerned, to garner as much of support for Pakistan's case as possible. Also, a meeting of the Federal Cabinet that was chaired by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif discussed the overall economic situation of the country and the rescue and relief operations in the flood-affected areas. The US Congress can also play an important role as far as helping vulnerable countries deal with climate change is concerned. This was said during a meeting between Hina Rabbani Khar Sahiba with the US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar in Washington DC. This and more is going to be part of our first segment, that is the updates as far as the flood relief operations are concerned. Also, the ADB has confirmed that it will be giving a major chunk of $1.5 billion to Pakistan for relief and rehabilitation. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns war against terrorism, the recent attack by insurgents. We have, as you have read and seen in all the major news channels and the newspapers, that 2 Pakistan Army soldiers have been martyred in South Waziristan's district Azam Warsak on Monday during a gunfight with terrorists. Why is there an increase in terrorist activities across the border into Pakistan, whether it be in Balochistan or whether it be in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province? We'll be discussing the impact of that and Pakistan's resolve to outthrow any such elements who are trying to wreak havoc in Pakistan. Then we'll be talking about Afghanistan and a senior UN official who has warned that a possible internal conflict and worsening poverty in Afghanistan could wreak havoc if the Taliban do not respond quickly to all the needs of the elements of society, and of course that includes the girls and the women's rights. Then we'll be talking about Indian authorities, ladies and gentlemen, that have decided to declare the Popular Front of India, otherwise known as PFI, and its affiliates as an unlawful association or organization with immediate effect. It has banned this organization for 5 years. The PFI condemns this series of detentions and related raids as harassment and has held street protests as a result of this. And finally, we'll be talking about explosions that have been recorded before mysterious leaks in 2 Baltic Sea gas pipelines that link the Russia and European region. This raises suspicions of sabotage. And of course, we all know the tensions that exist between Russia and Ukraine, this Nord 1 and Nord 2, and the suspected issues that have emanated from them raise a lot of question marks as to who is behind that. Both the sides deny it, that is Russia and the West. Let's see who is exactly, and we will know in due time who is behind this nefarious activity. Let's come with our first segment, and that concerns the flood and rehabilitation efforts that the government is doing, and also Pakistan's efforts to highlight the effect of climate change on countries such as Pakistan on the international arena. More in the following report.
Pakistan is grappling with devastating consequences of floods as monsoon rains of biblical proportions smashed centuries of weather records. With huge swathes of country still underwater following recent mega floods, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif appealed for global support to help face the consequences of a climate catastrophe at 77th session of United Nations General Assembly. Prime Minister noted that some 33 million people are now at risk of health hazards. More than 13,000 kilometers of roads have been damaged, 1 million homes have been destroyed, and another million damaged, and 4 million acres of crops have been washed away. On his visit to Pakistan earlier this month, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he had never seen climate change on this scale and called for urgent financial support to help Pakistan, saying it is not just a question of solidarity but a question of justice. The dual cost of global inaction and climate injustice are having crippling effect on developing world, and the world must realize the importance of implementation of climate change agenda in accordance with principles of common but differentiated responsibility. By COP27, we must secure the fulfillment of pledge launched by the industrialized countries to provide $100 billion plus annually in climate finance, allocate half of this in climate adaptation, and establish a financing facility to compensate developing countries for loss and damage from climate impact.
Now, to discuss that in detail, the flood and rehabilitation work that is going on in Pakistan and Pakistan's perspective as far as the effects of climate change and Pakistan's vulnerability as the country that has been most affected by the effects of climate change, we've been joined by Dr. Munir Ahmed. He's a climate advocacy expert. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us.
It's a pleasure.
Dr. Saab, when Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab talks about Pakistan's issues, especially related to climate change, and at the Wilson Center says that Pakistan does not want charity but economic justice. How justified is he?
What do you mean by justice? First of all, we need to discuss this thing. Justice means like if you do something or you do something, you should be taken care of.
To task.
Yeah. Yeah. And since we are a victim of climate change, and those all developed world and the industrial countries, they have contributed to in the highest increase in the greenhouse gas emissions, they should be liable for all the responsibility and all the floods and climate impact, and they should be paying all the bill for the adaptation and mitigation. And unfortunately, they are not fulfilling their commitments. And after Paris Agreement in 2000, but till today, they have not contributed the amount that was required for the Green Climate Fund to help those countries that are vulnerable to climate impact, and Pakistan is one of them. Some 5-7 years back, Pakistan was among top 10 vulnerable countries. The new German Watch report in 2020 declared Pakistan among top 5. And after these floods, I believe Pakistan must be top 2 or top 3 countries vulnerable to such kind of disasters.
How does a country, Dr. Saab, like Pakistan becomes the top most vulnerable country? How does it happen?
Because that is measured the impact that could happen after such kind of cold wave, heat wave, and such kind of they are the indicators that help you understand the vulnerability of any country to climate impact. And we are at the belt of the countries, those are most vulnerable to heat wave and cold wave. And our glaciers are melting at the highest speed. That is also one of the indicator. Again, if we talk about the glaciers, more than 300 lakes are can burst at any moment, and those are the red red hot spots in our mountains. And we have seen Shishpur Glacier Lake burst every year, and it destroys a lot of infrastructure and housing and the population areas and the crops. And recently we have seen the impact of the glacial lake burst. And again, if we see the heat wave that we went through, we are going through for several years, that is very alarming. And even a couple of years back, Karachi also suffered from heat wave in December.
True.
These are the indicators that make the organizations such as German Watch, they assess such kind of vulnerability and then group you in certain group like most vulnerable or less vulnerable or not vulnerable. And in the recent summer, the couple of months back, we saw Europe also suffering from heat wave. That was the first time they had such kind of heat wave where...
So we should be expecting floods like we've seen in Pakistan, maybe in other countries in the future as well as a result of climate change. Now, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab says the government's priority is to focus on ensuring economic and food security and seeking mutually beneficial trade and investment ties across the globe. Do you feel the world is going to react positively to what Pakistan is asking for, whether it be economic justice, whether it be help in the current circumstances for no fault of Pakistan's? Is there a realization in the world body or in the important countries that are the most serious carbon emitters that they need to be there for Pakistan?
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has already mentioned that the vulnerable countries need economic justice because they are facing the brunt of the steps taken by the industrial and developed countries. And during his visit to Pakistan, UN Secretary General emphasized on the world. But still, there's not very, we don't have such kind of response that we were expecting. And President Biden has also mentioned in his speech that still there is no response from the world community that was expected. And the world should mobilize their resources to help Pakistan. And that is like 1/3 of the country underwater of the floods. But recently, just a couple of days back, maybe yesterday, I was reading through the newspaper. America has increased $10 million aid to Pakistan.
Yes.
That has the US has already
But
agreed.
doesn't Pakistan need around $30 billion
$30 billion.
US
$30
dollars
billion, and it's a huge
but
money.
The damage is huge as well. 1/3 of Pakistan underwater, the infrastructure that has been destroyed, the livestock, people's livelihoods that have been destroyed. So to put Pakistan back up on its feet, we need this help, don't we?
Yes, we need. More than 300 dams were destroyed. The schools and basic health units and the crops and the bridges and the electricity system and what not is disturbed. And more of that, like millions of people have been disturbed, and they are now suffering from
diseases, waterborne diseases, dengue, malaria, cholera, and so on and so forth, snake bites, dog bites, especially in Karachi and adjoining areas. So there are a lot of diseases and difficulties that the people are encountering right now. Pakistan can only do as much as it can, Pakistan can also not exceed its own resources.
Pakistan has not that much resources even to combat or to meet up the health challenge if it spreads. For example, dengue, if spreads like it is usually spreads, we will not be able to handle dengue or the malaria or the typhoid and such kind of and we don't have enough vaccine of snake bites and dog bites. And in Sindh especially and in Balochistan, certainly the World Health Organization shall also come up to provide such kind of medicines that we are looking for to meet the health challenge that is occurring in Balochistan and in Sindh areas at the moment. And meanwhile, we have also seen much disaster in 3 districts of the mountain areas, Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral as well. But unfortunately, the disaster in Balochistan and Sindh province is huge. We are not considering those districts as well, because I have seen very less people talking about Chitral valleys and Diamar, Shigar and Gizar, though our Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif also visited these parts. They have also, there is assessment of the impact and the losses and damages.
Now, when you talk of impact and the losses, a recent survey by Save the Children, which is a United Kingdom-based charitable organization, says that more than 54% of the families that have been hit by massive floods are now living outside in small tents or in makeshift tents, or just some people are with just using some kind of sheets to spend the night. Then there is the level of joblessness across the country. 3.6 million workers have been rendered jobless as per that survey, as the floods have affected the livelihoods of around 33 million people. Will it take Pakistan a long time to come out of this crisis?
Certainly, yes. It will take several years. Even the economic growth that Asian Development Bank has said will drop down to 3.5%, and that is a major setback for Pakistan. And it would take another like 2-3 years to pick up the growth of the GDP growth. And the reconstruction and rehabilitation process certainly would take maybe 5 years or 7 years. And it is a huge task that Pakistan government has to take care of, and definitely it cannot be done without the support of international community. And the silence of international community is, I don't know, that is
because had it been
questionable at the
again,
moment.
I'll revert to what Bilawal Bhutto Sardari Sahab also said, that there needs to be economic justice. It's not no fault of Pakistan, the floods that have happened in Pakistan. This is climate change induced floods, and these are the result of carbon emissions, and Pakistan is not emitting enough carbon. This said, you were talking of the Asian Development Bank. Now, Asian Development Bank has announced $1.5 billion as counter-cyclical loan to Pakistan, which will be approved in October. Also, it will be providing $14 billion in support from 2022 to 2025 to address the food security in the country. Do you feel this is enough? Do you feel more organizations also need to step in? The World Bank needs to step in. And from that, I'd like to understand a lot of a lot of people talking about debt rescheduling. Is that important for Pakistan in this circumstance?
Of course, that is very important, and Pakistan has also paid and with the IMF and with the Paris Club to reschedule the loans. But I believe they would take some time, but certainly they should consider it. Meanwhile, World Bank has also extended $2 million, little more than $2 million to Pakistan as aid. And meanwhile, they are also considering $2 billion soft loan for Pakistan to mitigate the flood impact. But 2 billion and 1 billion and some millions will not
be enough.
And certainly will not be enough. And the developed countries should come up with the generous support. And so far, I don't see any significant commitments from the Paris Club countries or the NATO and the US. But it's like a couple of $1 million will not help our people to come out of the miseries. And certainly our Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Sardari Sahab and Prime Minister, they are also putting a lot of their efforts. But certainly our communities abroad and the humanitarian organizations shall also launch their own appeals. And meanwhile, we shall not
even Antonio Guterres has said that he's going to launch another appeal as far as Pakistan is concerned in the very near future. So let's see how that happens. As far as the 160 million pledge that was made, of that not much has been sent to the United Nations. We also hope that the countries that are listening to us also understand Pakistan's perspective and try to be there for Pakistan as much as they can.
One line. We shall also talk about our Pak Army.
Of course, the armed forces, Pakistan Navy, Pakistan Air Force, they've been helping as much as they can, and we have a whole list of all the help that they are providing to our people every day. Had it not been for our armed forces, our government agencies, our NGOs, Pakistani people would have been in a desperate state of affairs. Thank you very much, Munir Ahmed Saab, to have joined us, climate advocacy expert, talking to us about, of course, the latest as far as climate mitigation is concerned, and the relief and rehabilitation work in Pakistan is going on, and the pledges that have been made by the international organizations and the efforts that our Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister have been making in that context. Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen. Our second segment concerns the war against terrorism, the recent attack by insurgents. The latest of that attack happened on Monday. Who's behind that? What is the main reasoning behind the increase in such attacks in the last few years or so? More in the following report.
After facing protracted violence for more than a decade, Pakistan has achieved progressive and significant improvement in the country's overall security landscape in the recent years. However, Pakistan continues to be a target of terrorism, including state-sponsored terrorism from its immediate neighbours. 2 Pakistan Army soldiers were martyred in South Waziristan district's Azam-Warsak area during a gunfight with terrorists. According to a statement issued from Inter-Services Public Relations, clearance is being carried out to eliminate any terrorist found in the area. Last week, 2 Pakistan Army soldiers were martyred in North Waziristan district's Isham area because of an improvised explosive device. On the 13th of September, 3 soldiers were martyred in an exchange of fire with terrorists across the Pakistan-Afghanistan border in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Kuram district. The conflict and instability in Afghanistan remained an impediment for regional peace, security and development. Pakistan, because of its proximity and historical connection, faced the most serious consequences of war in Afghanistan, ranging from security to socio-economic. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's statement at Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit highlighted Pakistan's contribution towards global counterterrorism and the immense sacrifices and economic losses incurred over the last decades. On the situation in Afghanistan, Prime Minister underlined the need for constructive engagement with Afghan interim authorities to jointly eliminate the scourge of terrorism.
Now, as far as these insurgent attacks on Pakistani soil is concerned, a lot of this involves people from across the border, organizations from across the border, and that has been highlighted by our security agencies as well. Dr. Farah Naz, who is a leading foreign affairs expert, joins us online. Dr. Farah Naz, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Farah Naz, whether it be what happened on Monday, 2 soldiers martyred in gunfight with terrorists in South Waziristan, whether it be events that have happened before that as well, in which a lot of our army soldiers have also been martyred, why is there a deliberate attempt since the last year or so of insurgents fighting the armed forces inside Pakistan from across the border? What is the basic aim behind that?
Thank you, Omar, for having me. We have to see what we are actually demanding from the current de facto government, where we are asking them that they should not use their soil for any sort of terrorist activities. And here I specify, we don't demand them that the terrorist activity should not be held against Pakistan only, but we are demanding them that it should not be against any other state in the neighborhood or anywhere else. So I think that demand is too huge for the current de facto government to take care of, because there are a variety, a couple of reasons for that. One is that in the current system, whatever the current Taliban leaders are facing is they are dealing with the issue of those segments within their own system who think that they are not, fulfilling the requirements of the current Taliban setup. So they are the people who are coming from the past regimes who were very anti, and they were demanding, something based on whatever they believed was right for their ideology. So it is not easy for the de facto government to change everything so quickly. And another thing that we should be aware of is they have taken refuge in Afghanistan. So this is one of the major hospitality issue for the current government in Kabul, that they cannot kick them out so quickly. So Pakistan, unfortunately, has to pay a certain price to that for demanding, its soil not to be used for terrorist activities. We have seen recently these kind of activities have been growing in numbers. and where the attacks are quite targeted against our
because
armed
if you just
forces.
look at the recent spate of incidents, Dr. Farah, I talked about the 2 soldiers martyred in South Waziristan on Monday, 26 September, where terrorists fired at a military post in general area Azam Warsak. Then, of course, last week 2 Pakistan Army soldiers were martyred in North Waziristan. A week before, a Sepoy was martyred after terrorists from Afghanistan opened fire on army troops in Dwatoi area. And on the 13th of September, 3 soldiers were martyred in an exchange of fire with terrorists across the Pakistan-Afghanistan border in Kurram. These incidents have increased, and most of them are coming from across the border from Afghanistan. I'd like to refer to you something that was said at the United Nations, where Pakistan has expressed serious concern over these terrorism activities that are originating from Afghanistan. Munir Saab, he was speaking in the 15-member council's debate on the situation in Afghanistan, and he has said that Pakistan is going to support all efforts to neutralize and eliminate these terrorist groups. Is the resolve there in Afghanistan to also neutralize and eliminate such groups?
Well, this is what I was referring to earlier, that eliminating these groups, I think it's not an easy one for the current de facto government. And I gave you one of the major reasons for that is their Pashtun code of conduct that they follow and abide by, which strictly forbids them from kicking out those people who have taken refuge and shelter in their country and in their area. So this is against that. Now, the problem for the current regime is that they neither can kick them out, they neither can neutralize them on force. And with mutual consent, I think that is taking time for them to understand. So we can't see a chain of events taking place from quite some time since we are demanding them that the soil should not be used for terrorist activities. These attacks are getting stronger and more with each passing time and day. But here we have to see is when we put more pressure on the Taliban government that they should not allow them to have and to conduct such kind of activities, there will be a response. And we believe in action-reaction phenomena. So whenever we push them hard, they will respond back. And this does not mean that the Pakistan side is not responding to them the hard way. No, we are also giving them tough time, and we will do our level best to securitize ourselves. Yes,
Dr. Farah, I'd like to refer to what our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said at the United Nations General Assembly. He said terrorism does not have a religion. It is based on dogma, fueled by poverty, deprivation, injustice and ignorance, and fanned by vested interests. Also, I'd like to add to that what Munir Saab said, who has urged the international community to respond to the appeal of $4.2 billion in aid to Afghanistan. Do you feel that these activities are also somehow interrelated to the current economic crisis that Afghanistan is going through? And if economically stable, maybe Afghanistan would be better able to counter such terrorist threats?
Well, we have to look at the humanitarian crisis and the economic situation that is there in Afghanistan and the current terrorism activities that is happening on the Pakistan border as two different things. Yes, to certain degrees, we can say that more hunger will lead to thefts and, crimes. So that's a different story. But, those issues of hunger and deprivation and humanitarian crisis will lead into terrorist activities. I do not see those connected to it. Yes, I agree with the current Prime Minister of Pakistan's statement that they have some Western agenda, terrorism, They have some Western agenda, they have some larger goals to achieve, and it is beyond humanitarian crisis at first place. So we have to see why they're having these activities, what goals they want to achieve. Yes, they follow some strict religious, ideological understandings, but I would say it's not only religious, it has politics behind. There are various factions who are actively involved in Afghanistan who don't want to bring stability in Afghanistan. So we cannot say that it's only the internal factors who are anti-Pakistan, who are coming on the borders and, shooting down our soldiers and all of that. No, there is a lot more. There is some, foreign interest involved in all of this who don't want to bring these two countries on good terms to one another, where there is a lot of debate and discussion going on these days about the negotiations that is taking place between the defective government in Kabul and Islamabad. Well, it will take time to come to certain conclusion and all of that. But of course, as I said, there is an action-reaction phenomena. There will be groups who will be upset with all these arrangements, and they would do their level best to sabotage and to do certain kind of activities, and of course terrorist activities, which can affect these kind of negotiations to bearing fruit. So in that way, we can see external involvement in Kabul, in Afghanistan very strongly. Taliban government in Kabul, they are struggling with neutralizing those elements who are already there on their soil and bringing them to some kind of arrangement that they should not conduct terrorist activities in Afghanistan and on the border as well. But to achieve the external factors and the instigators' results, I think the current Taliban government will take some time, and they need time to mitigate
Does the current Taliban government, in your point of view, Dr. Farah, need the assistance of regional countries, those who want these terrorist activities to be eliminated? I'm not talking of those regional factors or elements that are trying to further, give fire to the current state of affairs in Afghanistan.
I think this is bringing peace in Afghanistan is not possible without the regional countries' help and support. And I think a peaceful Afghanistan will lead to a peaceful Pakistan. So for a peaceful Afghanistan, it is, having a peaceful Afghanistan in this region, I think this is in the best interest of all neighboring countries and regional countries. But the thing is, what the external factors, will they let it happen or not? I think that is really a big question mark here. They don't want this region to be peaceful, progressive, and stable. To destabilize them, I think terrorism is one of the oldest excuse that they are having it here. And we have seen, I think by now terrorism should have been completely eliminated from Afghanistan, because it was all about Taliban at that time. But when America left and Taliban got in power, then there shouldn't be any terrorist activities. Why will Taliban have terrorist activities, and against whom, and what they want to achieve once when they are in power? So, of course, there are certain groups within the Taliban. There are
a lot of question marks related to those groups, and of course the involvement as far as terrorist activities from the Afghan side into Pakistan are concerned. Thank you very much, Dr. Farah, to have joined us, to have talked to us about, of course, these terrorist and nefarious activities that are emanating from Afghanistan and causing havoc in Pakistan. Brigadier retired Nadir Mir, defense analyst, joins us online. Brigadier Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us. Brigadier Sahab, Monday, then all the previous weeks, every week we've heard of some kind of activity emanating from Afghanistan and causing damage to Pakistan. We've had so many of our armed forces Jawans martyred in the last few weeks, in the last few months as well. What is the basic aim of all those organizations that are trying to create havoc into Pakistan?
The terrorist activity emanating from Afghanistan into Pakistan, more specifically into KPK, parts of Pakistan in KPK and Baluchistan, and of course the rest, but generally along a western border. That has continued after the American NATO exit and the takeover of Kabul by the Afghan Taliban. And overall, as the whole world knows, the government and the people of Pakistan are supportive of the Afghan nation, the Afghan people, and the Afghan government today in Kabul. So in principle, this should not have happened. And it should not happen practically because Pakistan has lost too many young sons, soldiers, and young officers, as you correctly pointed out, on a very frequent basis. These terrorist attacks and of various nature have been carried out. So, first of all, what is happening is primarily geopolitical terrorism. Previous to the takeover of Kabul by the Afghan Taliban, for the last 20 years, it was a war primarily waged between the Afghan Taliban and others with the American NATO forces which had occupied Afghanistan or which were resident in Afghanistan. And prior to that, as we know the history, it was the Afghan Taliban, and prior was the Mujahideen struggle against the Soviet Union. So it's a time history of about 40 years, from 1979 till last year, this package has been going on, and it should have finished this terrorist part as far as Pakistan is concerned. So besides the fact that these various state actors, more chiefly India of course, is sponsoring some terrorist group from Afghanistan because they want to keep the second front alive. Initially they were doing it because of the war that was being waged between NATO and the Afghan Taliban, but now they're doing because of the fact that Afghanistan, though controlled or run by the Afghan Taliban from Kabul, is a state in various having numerous problems, from economics to border management to other things.
Brigadier Saab, are the economic problems the reason behind Afghan Taliban's government not able to control these elements that are creating havoc in Pakistan?
There are two reasons. First answer to your question is yes, partially yes. The economics of Afghanistan, where that government is not stable in the economic sense, and it needs aid and funds, which Pakistan has supported incidentally. But Pakistan, as I have said this not only as a defense analyst, but as chairman of Pakistan National Reform Movement, that while on the one hand we support Afghanistan, and we should, on the other hand we have to make sure that no attack emanates, terrorist attacks, from Afghanistan or from Afghan soil, or is supported from there. And we have been unable to do that, and for that the governments of Pakistan and the entire nation has to make, and we have to go across. In case this continues, then we don't have to, this war, terrorist war in any form continues, then we have to finish this war both politico-economically but also militarily, and for that you have to even strike across the border in some form or the other. And if we have to do that, we should, because we must make sure that Pakistan is not attacked. So there has been, I won't say it lapse, but there's a policy which is required, that Pakistan will not allow any attack on this. Imagine if the Indians were launching some strike or eastern border was being attacked. We would retaliate. When the Indian planes came, we shot them down and we went and bombed across the LFC in Kashmir. And similarly, if the Indians do something, we will do it. So why don't we do it on this side? The point is not that we have to wage war against Afghanistan. We support Afghanistan, but we cannot allow ourselves to be attacked. So we have to have a clear policy, and someone has to implement this policy.
All right, Brigadier Saab, that's a point that needs to be discussed in detail, and we'll do that in further shows. But you talked about India. What about the regional players that are trying to provoke these elements in Afghanistan for attacking Pakistan and, of course, for destabilizing Pakistan?
Basically, you see, it is India, because as you recently heard, when the Americans have released a small amount just to maintain the F-16 fleet of Pakistan, not really upgrade it, not add anything, not even augment it, just maintain it. I mean, it's nothing big. The Indians have, you know what they've said? They've said it so openly. So they don't even want Pakistan to be armed or have an ability to defend itself. So we should be clear. We are not clear, and I have said it previously, I'm saying it very openly now. The biggest threat to Pakistan, which was India, is not only in the east, is also in the west. If somebody is sponsoring, you see, the Afghan Taliban by themselves are not attacking Pakistan. I mean, if they were, then Pakistan and Afghanistan would be at war because they are in power in Kabul. So somebody else is. Yes, it's a lapse or weakness of the Afghan Taliban that they are unable to control or unwilling to whatever. But we have to make sure that who, and I think it's not so difficult to find out who is behind these terrorist attacks and what to do about it. I mean, they're not coming from the moon, or they're not coming from across oceans, they're coming from across the western border. So we have to have a complete policy. We are having a very defensive policy, and this defensive policy won't work. So we have to have both ways. On the one hand, we support them, I mean, in every way. Afghanistan is a landlocked country. All the aid goes from here, and we should keep supporting them and aiding them. But in return, the least we can ask for is to make sure that nobody attacks our side. And if it is done, then we need to do something about it.
All right, thank you very much, Brigadier Retired Nadim Mir, Sub-Defense Analyst, to have joined us, to have given us your point of view as far as these incursions from across Afghanistan into Pakistan causing havoc and loss of life in our country is concerned, whether it be in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Of late, we've seen one or more incidents per week happening, or whether it be in Balochistan. Let's come to our last three stories very quickly. The first concerns, of course, Afghanistan. United Nations Humanitarian Chief Martin Griffiths said way back in late August that more than half of the Afghan population, which is about 24 million Afghan people, need assistance, and close to 19 million are facing acute levels of food insecurity. Now, Marcus Potzel, who is the United Nations Deputy Representative for Afghanistan, has recently told the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council, that some of the Taliban's claimed and acknowledged achievements are also eroding. He has pointed towards a steady rise in armed clashes, criminal activity, high-profile terrorist attacks, especially by the IS, and he said that the economic situation in the country also remains tenuous, with food security worsening and winter approaching. And he talked again about the $4.4 billion of assistance that is required, of which the Afghanistan has only received $1.9 billion, which is alarming. So, of course, a huge economic and humanitarian situation arising in Afghanistan, and a lot of elements that are taking advantage of that. Then we'll take you to India, which has banned the Muslim organization Popular Front of India and its affiliates as an unlawful association with immediate effect, and it has banned the organization for a period of 5 years. The authorities detained scores of members of the Muslim organization on Tuesday and earlier in the month. They have accused them of violence and anti-national activities. Of course, the BFI has condemned these detention and the raids and have called them as harassments and have protested against them. Similar detentions have been made in the northeastern state of Assam, days after the ban was asked on the PFI. It all is pointing towards a Muslim marginalization one way or the other, and of course the Hindutva policy that India is more propagating since the last few years, since the BJP came into power. And finally, let's take you to blasts and leaks in Russian pipelines that have alarmed Europe, and a lot of people are speculating that it is foul play. Russia denies that it is behind any of that, but the West says that it might be, but a lot of question marks are emanating. This is, of course, the Nord 1 stream and 2 stream pipelines that have been at the center of geopolitical tensions in the recent months, as Russia had cut supplies to Europe in suspected retaliation against Western sanctions following its invasion of Europe. Now, these explosions were heard before mysterious leaks in 2 Baltic Sea gas pipelines that link Russia and Europe. They have raised suspicions of sabotage amid tensions of the war between Russia and Ukraine. What will happen of it? Will those be contained? Will we know finally who was behind it? Only time will tell. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. We are in the midst of a crisis. We need to help our fellow Pakistanis as much as we can, contribute as much as you can, directly or indirectly, through all the different organizations that are working towards that. Allah Hafiz.